After 3 years of keeping his late brother's workshop locked, former Navy SEAL Owen Kessler was ready to let that dream disappear into storage. Then, on a bright winter morning in Idaho, a wary German shepherd refused his food and kept leading him deeper into the snow. Beneath an abandoned pump house, Owen found 6 newborn puppies, and a mother who had risked leaving them because their shelter was failing. Saving them brought people back into Northlight, but it also forced Owen to face something harder. He had turned grief into a life where no one was allowed to help him. As Juniper learned to trust others and eventually let her puppies leave for new homes, Owen began learning that protecting what we love does not mean holding it forever. By spring, the workshop he once kept frozen in memory had become a shared place of work, rescue, and second chances, and Juniper had found a permanent home beside him. Stay to hear how one winter changed them both, and if the story moves you, tell us where you're watching from, like the video, and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers and keep these stories coming. January had turned Sawtooth Valley white enough to erase distance. By 7 in the morning, the storm had moved east, leaving the Idaho sky painfully clear. Sunlight struck the new snow and came back hard, bright enough to make Owen Kessler narrow his eyes behind the windshield. He drove slowly, not because the road frightened him, because ice did not care how much experience a man had. At 46, Owen still carried some of the physical discipline of the Navy SEAL he had once been, though very little about him looked ceremonial anymore. His hair had grown longer since leaving the service, dark blonde gone silver at the temples, pushed back carelessly above a narrow, weathered face. A short salt and pepper beard softened the sharpness of his jaw. Only his eyes still gave him away sometimes, gray-blue, watchful, measuring space before people. His olive waxed canvas jacket lay open over a charcoal Henley. A carpenter's pencil rested in the cup holder beside the truck keys. He had no reason to bring it. Habit. Northlight Workshop stood 4 miles from his cabin, beyond a low ridge where wind often buried the county road faster than the plows could clear it. 3 years earlier, Owen and his younger brother Luke had bought the old repair building together. Luke had imagined benches, evening classes, engine repair, woodworking, and adults who needed somewhere useful to be at 8 in the morning. Owen had imagined permits, insurance, electrical loads, emergency exits, and a budget that worked. They had argued, often. They had also been happy. Then Luke got leukemia. For more than a year, Owen's life narrowed into medication schedules, hospital parking garages, thermometers, appointments in Boise, meals Luke could tolerate, insurance calls, and the unspoken discipline of acting normal whenever his brother was tired of being sick. Owen had been good at that life. There had always been a next thing to do. When Luke died at 40, there was suddenly nothing. People had called Owen brave afterward. He had hated them for it. He had not been brave. He had simply continued waking up. He kept Northlight heated just enough to keep the pipes from freezing. He paid the insurance. He changed the generator oil. After heavy snow, he checked the roof. Then he locked the doors again. Maintenance was easier than grief because maintenance had tolerances. A bearing was good or bad. A roof carried weight or failed. A person could measure those things. Next week, a regional winter equipment company wanted to discuss leasing Northlight for storage. Owen had not said yes. He had also not said no. That morning, he was driving out to inspect the drainage behind the building before the meeting when he saw the dog. She stood where the plowed shoulder disappeared beneath the pines. German shepherd. Female, he guessed. Black across the back, deep golden brown along the legs and chest. Snow clung beneath her belly and packed between her toes. She was lean, though not skeletal. Owen slowed. The dog did not move. He stopped 20 yards beyond her and watched through the rearview mirror. She watched him back. He stepped out. Cold bit immediately through the open collar of his jacket. The shepherd moved into the trees, not running. 20 yards, maybe 25. Then she stopped and looked over her shoulder. "Not interested," Owen said. His voice sounded strange in the empty road. The dog came back. She stopped farther away this time. Owen opened the truck's rear door and found a small package of dried meat he kept for long drives. He tore off a piece and tossed it onto clean snow between them. The shepherd approached cautiously. She sniffed it, did not eat. Instead, she looked toward the forest again, then back at him. Owen felt something in his attention change. Not alarm. Pattern recognition. He knew the difference between an animal wandering near a road and one repeating an action with purpose. Still, he did not follow. He looked at the forest. Fresh snow could hide drainage cuts, fallen branches, open water, wire, unstable slopes. Visibility was good now, but weather in the valley could change faster than judgment. The shepherd disappeared into the trees. Owen exhaled. Good. He turned toward his truck. A moment later, claws scraped softly against packed snow behind him. She had returned. Closer this time. Her amber-brown eyes fixed on him. The right ear stood perfectly upright. The tip of the left bent slightly outward, giving her otherwise serious face a small asymmetry. She took 3 steps toward the woods. Stopped. Waited. The feeling that moved through Owen was not affection. It was irritation, because something was asking him to make a decision. For 3 years, he had organized his life specifically to avoid decisions that might lead somewhere. He looked at the dog. She looked back. Then she turned toward the forest again. "All right." The word came out quietly. Owen called county dispatch before he changed his mind. He gave his name, road marker, approximate coordinates, and explained that he was following a loose German shepherd a short distance into the woods because the animal appeared to be repeatedly directing him toward something. The dispatcher asked whether he was injured. "No." "Armed?" Owen glanced toward the truck. "No reason to be." He told them he had satellite communication and would check in. Only then did he prepare. Snowshoes, GPS, first aid kit, thermal blankets, water, a coil of utility rope, the small pulk sled he used for hauling firewood when the driveway drifted over. His old instincts had once been built around speed. Age had taught him that preparation often looked slower right up until the moment it saved time. The shepherd waited. When Owen finally stepped into the trees, she moved ahead. She did not stay beside him. She kept a careful distance, sometimes disappearing behind a trunk before reappearing farther upslope. 3/4 of a mile took longer than it looked on a map. Snow reached almost to Owen's knees where the wind had piled it. His breathing settled into an old rhythm. The forest smelled of cold bark, resin, and clean snow. Then the ground began dropping toward a narrow hollow. The shepherd accelerated. Owen saw the structure only when he was nearly on top of it. An abandoned pump house crouched beneath the slope, its corrugated roof bent under wet snow. Meltwater had frozen into blue-white sheets along one side. The dog vanished beneath the raised floor. Owen stopped. He heard nothing at first. Then something small made a sound under the boards. Not a bark, barely even a whine. Owen crouched and removed one glove. He leaned toward the opening. 6 puppies lay pressed together in a shallow nest of dry grass, cloth scraps, and shed fur. Their eyes were closed. They were newborns, but not fresh from birth. 4 days old, perhaps 5, if his rough guess meant anything. The smallest lay near the damp edge of the nest. One side of the shelter had begun taking water. The mother pushed past Owen and curled herself around them. For the first time, she accepted the piece of dried meat he placed near her front paws. She ate without lifting her head from the litter. Owen sat back on his heels. No mystery waited under the floor. No secret meant for him. No explanation for why this particular dog had found this particular road. Only 6 fragile bodies, a mother who had run out of good options, and a shelter that would become colder when the sun dropped. Owen took out the satellite radio. Before calling, he looked once toward the mother. Her eyes were on him, still cautious, still measuring. He understood that look better than trust. It meant, "Show me what you do next." Owen contacted dispatch and described exactly what he had found. He did not touch the puppies. He did not promise the dog anything. He simply stayed beside the opening while help was sent. For 3 years, nearly every important choice in his life had been postponed because choosing one direction meant closing another. This choice was smaller. The shelter was failing. The puppies could not remain there. That was enough. The shepherd lowered her head across the litter. Owen sat in the snow outside and waited with her. For the first time in a long while, he was not asking what came after. There was something that needed doing now. And for the moment, that was a life he still knew how to live. Dana Whitlock reached the pump house 40 minutes later in a county utility vehicle fitted with tracks. She was 43, compact and weather-hardened, with dark brown curls tucked beneath a green field cap and an orange waterproof notebook already open in one hand. She greeted Owen with a nod, then looked past him. "Show me before we move anything." That answer told him more about her than an introduction would have. Dana crouched at the opening, checked the sagging roof, the damp side of the nest, and the mother's posture. She did not reach for the puppies. "Shelter's getting wet, but it isn't collapsing in the next 10 minutes, she said. "So we used the 10 minutes. The shepherd watched her closely. Dana set water within reach and waited until the mother drank. Only then did they discuss transport. The nearest veterinary clinic was accessible again, but 2 stretches of county road remained poorly cleared. Moving 7 animals farther than necessary made little sense. Owen mentioned Northlight. "It has power?" "Yes." "Reliable heat?" "Minimum heat, enough to protect plumbing." "Running water?" "Yes." Dana looked at him. "Then I inspect it first." They lined Owen's Polk sled with thermal blankets and created a windbreak around the sides. The puppies stayed together. Owen moved only when Dana directed him. The mother followed, close enough to monitor every hand. Northlight stood silent beneath a bright white roof when they arrived. Owen unlocked the side entrance. For the first time in years, someone besides him crossed the threshold with a reason to stay. Dana ignored the main workshop and went directly to the utility wash bay and back. Concrete floor, floor drain, separate exterior door, running water. Also 2 old containers of solvent, a shelf of cleaning chemicals, and enough dust to disqualify the room immediately. "This isn't an animal room," Owen said. "No," Dana replied. "Which is why we make it safe before pretending it is." They removed the chemicals, scrubbed the floor, and set up a contained nesting area away from drafts. A portable heat source was positioned where it could warm the space without blowing directly onto the litter. When Dana finally approved the room, the shepherd entered before either human encouraged her. She circled once, then twice. She lay down around her puppies. Owen stood at the doorway. Something about that bothered him, not the dog, the room. Northlight had spent 3 years preserved exactly as he had left it, safe from interruption. Now there were wet paw prints across a floor he had kept clean for no one. He found he did not want to wipe them away. Dr. Maren Holt arrived in the afternoon after the plow cleared the last difficult section. She was 50, lean and quick-moving, with auburn hair threaded with silver tied low at her neck. Slate blue scrubs showed beneath a charcoal winter jacket. She entered carrying a medical case, assessed the room once, and asked, "Which puppy is weakest?" No congratulations, no questions about Owen's military history. He pointed to the smallest female. Marin examined the mother first. Mild dehydration, weight loss consistent with nursing, no obvious severe injury. Then the puppies. "They're cold-stressed," she said. "This little one more than the others." Owen watched the smallest pup barely shift beneath Marin's fingers. "Supplemental feeding?" "Not yet." He looked at her. Marin checked the puppy's temperature again. "Warm first, then reassess nursing. Feeding a cold neonate can create a different emergency." Owen nodded. Marin glanced up. "You always take instructions this easily?" "Only when I know less than the person giving them." "That'll save us time." By evening, the smallest puppy's temperature had improved, and she had managed a weak but sustained latch. Dana scanned the mother for a microchip. The machine beeped. For a moment, Owen thought they had an answer. They did not. The registration led to an old number no longer in service and an address in another county with outdated ownership information. Dana began the required lost animal process. "She isn't yours because she followed you," she told Owen. "I know. You'd be surprised how often I have to explain that." The dog still needed a working name for records. Outside the wash bay window, low juniper shrubs bent beneath snow. Dana looked from them to the shepherd. "Juniper?" The dog did not react. Marin smiled faintly. "Strong objection." Juniper went into the paperwork. By nightfall, Dana had arranged temporary emergency foster status at Northlight, under county oversight. She left written instructions, contact numbers, and clear conditions. Marin packed her instruments. Owen expected relief when everyone left. Instead, Northlight became too quiet. He walked toward the exit. Behind him came the soft movement of Juniper shifting around her litter. Owen stopped at the side door. He could drive 4 miles home. Nothing required him to sleep here. That mattered. He returned to the office, unfolded an old cot, and set an alarm for the next scheduled check. "Just tonight," he said to no one. Through the open doorway, Juniper lifted her head once, then settled again. Owen sat down. For 3 years, he had kept Northlight warm enough not to die. Tonight, for the first time, it was warm because something living needed it. By the 6th day, Northlight had acquired a rhythm Owen had not planned. Dana checked in each morning. Marin returned twice to examine Juniper and the litter. The smallest female was gaining weight, slowly but consistently. Animal Services kept searching the microchip trail, but every lead ended in an old address, a disconnected number, or someone who had never heard of the dog. Owen found the uncertainty easier than expected. He did not need Juniper to have a remarkable past. She had 6 puppies. They needed warmth. That was enough. What became harder was allowing anyone else to help. He weighed the puppies before breakfast, cleaned the nesting area, checked the generator, recorded room temperature, changed bedding, washed bowls, and repeated most of it before anyone suggested it. Dana offered to schedule an approved rescue volunteer for the night shift. "No need." Marin told him to sleep at home. "I'm sleeping." 3 hours in a folding cot is not sleep. It's losing consciousness with paperwork nearby. Owen ignored that. Then Victor Salazar walked in carrying a steel toolbox. He was 57, shorter than Owen and built low and solid, with silver working through black hair and a neat salt and pepper goatee. A red shop rag hung from his back pocket. His hands already looked as though they had spent the morning inside an engine. Victor had known both Kessler brothers long before Luke became sick. For 3 years, he had also been one of the people Owen kept at exactly the right distance. Close enough to answer a call, never close enough to ask for anything. Victor listened to Northlight's generator for 10 seconds. "That bearing sounds terrible." "It runs." Victor looked at him. "So do you." Owen almost smiled. Almost. Victor opened the toolbox without asking permission. That bothered Owen more than it should have. An hour later, Dana arrived with a revised foster schedule. Victor's name occupied one of the night blocks. Owen stared at it. I didn't agree to that. You agreed to county oversight, Dana said, and county oversight includes a rested primary caregiver. I can manage 7 dogs. I believe you. That isn't the same as believing you should manage them alone. The sentence stayed with him after she left. That evening, Owen handed Victor the feeding log. He explained the columns twice. Victor took the clipboard. I can read. I know. Then go sit somewhere else. Owen did. Barely. He moved into the workshop and began sorting old invoices he had already sorted once. The buildings settled around him. Pipes clicked. Wind pressed lightly against the metal siding. Then the compressor kicked on. A hard metallic crack split the room. Owen was standing before he knew he had moved. His breath shortened. The room narrowed into exits, corners, distances. Victor appeared in the doorway but did not approach. Owen? No response. Victor looked around the workshop. Blue door. Owen's eyes shifted. Workbench. Another breath. Fire extinguisher. Owen swallowed. From the utility room came 6 thin complaints, puppies awakened by the noise. Victor nodded toward them. There. 6 very angry civilians. Something loosened. Owen sat heavily on the edge of the bench. Juniper rose inside the nesting area. She came only as far as the doorway. She watched him, one ear straight, the tip of the other folded outward. She did not touch him. She simply remained there. Victor leaned against the wall. No speeches, Owen said. Wasn't planning one. They stayed that way until Owen's breathing returned to normal. Later, while Victor handled the next puppy check, Owen stood alone in Northlight's small office with his phone in his hand. There was a number in his contacts he had ignored often enough to know it by sight. Jonah Mercer. Vet Center. Owen had missed 3 appointments with him the previous year. He pressed call. Jonah answered after the 4th ring. His voice was calm, ordinary. Kessler? Yeah. You calling to reschedule or apologize? Owen looked through the office window. Victor was writing in the log. Juniper had settled beside her puppies again. Reschedule. A pause. What changed? Owen rubbed a hand over his beard. I think I got too good at making avoidance look like discipline. Jonah did not congratulate him for saying it. He only asked, Tuesday work? Owen looked at the calendar. Yes. When the call ended, he remained standing there for a while. Nothing in the room had changed. The grief was still his. So was the building. So was Tuesday. But for once, Owen had put something on the calendar that was not maintenance. By the middle of January, Animal Services had exhausted the useful leads attached to Juniper's microchip. The registered phone number had been disconnected years earlier. The listed address belonged to different occupants now. No credible owner responded to the notices. Juniper and her puppies were transferred into the care of a regional nonprofit that specialized in working breeds. Its director arrived at Northlight carrying a gray clipboard and a rust-colored slip lead looped at her belt. Grace Merritt was 54, compact, silver-haired, and unimpressed by good intentions. She watched Juniper before she looked at the building. Then she inspected the wash bay. This works for what you needed it to do, Grace said. Owen heard the missing word. But emergency foster space and permanent rescue space are different things. She began listing requirements. Separate ventilation from the workshop, washable surfaces, noise control, isolation capacity, insurance. Written veterinary oversight. Backup caregivers. Owen reached automatically for the carpenter's pencil behind his ear. Grace noticed. Don't measure anything yet. His hand stopped. Why? Because your first problem isn't square footage. She tapped the clipboard against her leg. It's who is responsible when you aren't here. Owen disliked the question enough to know it mattered. Later that afternoon, Victor found him in the office pulling Luke's old project binders from a cabinet. Nothing inside had been hidden. There were electrical estimates, insurance quotes, workshop layouts, class ideas, emails from people offering to teach welding or engine repair, and budgets with more red numbers than black. Luke had written practical notes everywhere. Call inspector, too expensive, aft Victor, needs second exit. On several pages he had simply written, not solved. Owen sat with one binder open across his knees. For years he had treated those unfinished pages as evidence that the project had stopped with Luke. Now they looked different. They looked unfinished because unfinished things were normal. Victor leaned against the doorframe. "You're thinking about finishing his plan exactly as drawn." Owen did not answer. Victor continued. "Northlight was supposed to help people, not preserve Luke's handwriting." "That isn't what I'm doing. Then why do you look angry every time someone changes something?" That landed harder than Owen expected. Grace wanted part of the rear storage annex converted into foster space. Marin had already warned that animals could not share workshop air contaminated by sawdust, solvents, or engine fumes. Dana said the county had its own limits on what Northlight could legally provide. Luke had never designed any of that. Owen looked down at the old floor plan. "If I change enough of it, it stops being his." Victor shook his head. "No. If nobody can use it, it stops being anything." 3 nights later, Owen opened Northlight for a community meeting. 23 adults came. Retired tradespeople, veterans, local business owners, rescue volunteers. 2 people who had known Luke well and several who had never met him. Owen stood beside a whiteboard and explained the idea without dressing it up. The main building would remain a skills workshop. The rear annex might become foster and recovery space operated by Grace's organization, with separate ventilation and access. Northlight would not become a veterinary clinic. Marin would remain an outside veterinary partner. Then the questions began. Who paid utilities? Who carried liability? Could Owen close the project whenever he wanted if he still owned the property? A local business owner in a charcoal quarter-zip asked the question Owen had been hoping no one would ask. Why should the community invest in a building one man still controls? The room went still. Owen's first instinct was defense. He had paid the taxes. He had maintained the roof. He had kept the pipes from freezing when no one else cared whether Northlight survived winter. All of that was true. None of it answered the question. He turned to the whiteboard. Under funding, he wrote unknown, then beneath governance, unknown. A few people shifted in their chairs. Owen faced them again. I'm not asking anyone to fund a project where I keep every decision. Victor's expression changed slightly. So did Grace's. Owen continued. If this opens, it needs a board, public accounting, defined responsibility between the workshop and the rescue. I can provide the building on a nominal lease for the first year. That doesn't mean I get to own everybody's work. The meeting did not suddenly become inspirational. They argued about heating costs. Someone objected to dogs near machinery. Grace explained the separate annex again. A bookkeeper volunteered to help design financial reporting. A retired electrician offered inspection time, not free rewiring. 2 local businesses offered materials at cost. By the end of the evening, the whiteboard contained fewer answers than Owen would have preferred. But besides several problems were names. People had taken responsibility for pieces of the work. After everyone left, Owen remained alone in the engine bay. Victor's handwriting appeared beside generator plan. Grace's beside foster operations. Another name stood beside finance. Owen had spent 3 years keeping Northlight intact. Tonight, for the first time, other people had begun changing it. He expected that to feel like losing Luke again. Instead, it felt dangerously close to letting the building live. By early February, the puppies had stopped looking fragile. Their eyes were open now. Their legs worked badly but enthusiastically, carrying them across the rubber flooring in short, determined bursts before gravity won. Juniper changed with them. She still counted each puppy after visitors left, touching noses one by one. But she no longer rose every time Victor entered the room or when Grace replaced bedding. Some days she even slept while other people worked nearby. Other days a dropped pan or unfamiliar voice sent her back to the litter. Marin never called those days setbacks. "Safety isn't a straight line," she told Owen. "Neither is trust." Owen thought about that during his Tuesday sessions with Jonah. Counseling had become another item on the calendar, except, unlike generator maintenance, it produced no satisfying checklist. Some weeks Owen talked about Luke. Some weeks he spent 40 minutes discussing Northlight instead. Jonah let him. Then, one afternoon, he asked, "Why can Victor make decisions about machinery, but the board reviewing expenses makes you angry?" Owen looked away from the laptop. "The generator wasn't Luke's." Jonah waited. Owen heard himself before he fully understood the answer. "If Northlight changes enough, eventually there's nothing left of what we planned." "Or," Jonah said, "there's something left that can keep changing." Owen disliked the sentence. That usually meant he would think about it for several days. Meanwhile, Grace began screening homes for the puppies. She treated adoption with less romance than most people treated buying a truck. Work schedules, housing, veterinary costs, exercise, training, backup plans. One applicant seemed nearly perfect. He was 44, well-spoken, financially secure, and had owned large dogs before. He arrived in an expensive charcoal coat and spent 20 minutes sitting quietly on the floor until one puppy climbed into his lap. Owen assumed Grace would approve him. She did not. "He travels 10 to 12 days a month," Grace said afterward. "He can afford dog care." "That isn't the question." "He clearly wants the dog." Grace closed the file. "We aren't finding people who want dogs. We're finding lives dogs can live well in." The distinction stayed with Owen. He had spent years believing wanting to protect something gave him the right to decide what happened to it. By late February, Marin cleared the litter for placement, as each puppy reached the appropriate age and health milestones. The first went to a retired couple who had lived with German Shepherds for 20 years. The second left with a veterinary technician whose schedule allowed her to be home most afternoons. Another went to 2 experienced trail maintenance workers. Then came Calvin Reed, 62, a retired Army mechanic with a silver mustache, large oil-marked hands, and an Army green cap without insignia. He did not crouch over the puppies or call them babies. He watched the largest male investigate his bootlaces. "What do you want him for?" Grace asked. Calvin considered. "Company, structure, a reason to walk before breakfast." "Service dog?" "No." "Therapy dog?" "No." Calvin looked down as the puppy tried to climb onto his boot. "Dog." Grace smiled for the first time that afternoon. When each puppy left, Owen watched Juniper more closely than he watched the adopters. She inspected the crate, smelled the person taking her pup, touched noses with the puppy, then stood quietly as the vehicle disappeared beyond the snowbank. Owen had expected panic. Instead, she returned to the remaining litter. There was a difference, he realized, between losing something and allowing it to leave safely. The final puppy departed on a pale afternoon when the snow had begun dripping from Northlight's roof. The nesting area looked too large afterward. Juniper walked through it slowly. She smelled each empty bed, paused at the water bowl, then left the room. Owen found her beneath the main workbench. He sat on the floor nearby. For several minutes, neither moved. He had once imagined healing as restoration. Put everything back, close every wound, return the room to how it had been. But the room could not return. Luke was gone. The puppies were gone. Tomorrow Victor would work somewhere else. Grace would have another foster case. Jonah would end their call at the scheduled hour. Love did not prevent departures. Juniper rested her chin on her paws. Owen looked toward the open workshop. Maybe protecting something did not mean keeping it. Maybe sometimes it meant making sure it could leave without being abandoned. By early March, Northlight had passed its basic occupancy, electrical, and fire inspections. The workshop was not fully open yet, but the county had approved one limited use. During local power failures, the main bay could serve as an auxiliary warming site for adults. Grace's foster annex remained separate, under the rescue's control. Owen liked that arrangement because it had boundaries. Then, on a Thursday night, the temperature dropped 18 degrees in 4 hours. Ice formed on power lines across the valley. At 9:17 p.m., Owen's phone rang. County Emergency Management had lost power to 2 rural sections north of town. Northlight was being activated. 3 years earlier, Owen would have heard only one message in that call. Get there first. Handle it. This time he heard something else. Follow the plan. When he arrived, Victor was already checking the generator. Grace unlocked the annex entrance. A volunteer set up registration near the front doors. No one waited for Owen to tell them how to begin. That unsettled him. It also worked. People arrived in small groups rather than a dramatic flood. A restaurant owner brought 2 insulated containers of soup. A retired radio operator set up a portable ham unit in case cell service weakened. Calvin Reed came carrying flashlights, extension cords, and enough spare batteries to supply a hunting camp. You volunteering? Owen asked. Calvin shrugged. You needed hands. His young German shepherd stayed home. That detail pleased Grace. By 11, the main bay held folding chairs, coffee, wet boots, quiet conversation, and people charging medical devices under supervised load. Owen moved between the registration table and county radio, tracking capacity and supplies. He noticed Victor studying the generator panel. The engine note had changed. Owen was halfway across the room before Victor looked up. Where are you going? Generator. Why? Because I heard it. Victor pointed toward the communication desk. Congratulations, your ears work. Logistics. Owen stopped. A licensed electrician was already walking toward the panel. Every instinct in Owen told him that competence meant moving toward the problem. For the first time, he deliberately moved away. 10 minutes later, Victor reported that the load had approached the safe operating threshold. Non-essential circuits were cut, 2 devices were moved to another approved source, and the generator settled. Nothing dramatic happened. That was the success. Near midnight, another sound changed, not machinery. Breathing. Elliot Barnes, 64, stood near the coffee table with one hand gripping the back of a chair. Tall but thin, white-haired, wearing a dark green quilted vest, he kept turning a silver wedding band around his finger. The generator had surged briefly when the load shifted. Elliot's face had gone pale. Owen recognized the look. He did not cross the room immediately. Juniper was resting near his desk. She lifted her head, watched Elliot, then rose. No command, no vest, no trained task. She walked across the floor and stopped several feet from him. Elliot noticed her. His breathing remained fast, but his attention moved. Friendly? He asked. When she wants to be. Elliot lowered one hand. Can I? Owen looked at Juniper rather than answering for her. She stepped closer. Elliot touched the side of her neck. No one applauded. No one called it healing. After a minute, Owen asked, You want something to do? Elliot looked up. What? Inventory. Blankets, batteries, bottled water. Elliot released the chair. I can count. Good. We have things worth counting. Half an hour later, he was correcting someone else's battery total. By 2 in the morning, the building had found its rhythm. Grace handled the animals. Victor handled mechanical systems. The electrician handled electrical load. County handled road updates. Owen coordinated. He was useful without being central to every solution. The distinction felt almost physical. At 4:38, power returned across the affected area. No wall had collapsed. No rescue vehicle raced through snow. No one had needed Owen to carry the entire night. People stacked chairs, wiped tables, signed out, and went home. Victor shut down the generator and logged the runtime. Grace checked the annex one last time. Owen stood in the center of the workshop as the noise drained away. Luke had once imagined Northlight as a place where people could come because they were expected somewhere. Owen had spent years thinking the building would become real only when he was finally capable of holding it together. He understood now that the opposite was true. Northlight had worked because responsibility had been divided, because people knew their jobs, because no one person had to become indispensable. Juniper came to stand beside him. Owen looked around the room. A useful system, he realized, was not one without problems. It was one that did not need a hero every time a problem appeared. Late March brought longer afternoons to Sawtooth Valley. Snow still covered the fields, but water dripped from Northlight's eaves by noon and froze again after sunset. The building was ready to open. Not finished. Ready. Owen had learned to respect the difference. A small plaque inside the entrance listed Luke Kessler as one of Northlight's original founders. Owen had rejected the idea of putting his brother's name across the front. Luke had begun the work. He had not finished it. Neither had Owen. That mattered. Northlight now had a governing board. A local accountant handled financial reporting. Victor oversaw operations. Grace's rescue organization controlled the Foster Annex through a separate agreement. Owen still owned the building, but ownership no longer meant he could change every rule because the mood struck him. The arrangement occasionally annoyed him. That was probably evidence it was working. Opening morning produced problems immediately. A cabinet door would not close. 2 workshop registrations had been entered for the wrong hour. One saw fence needed recalibration. In the rescue annex, a newly arrived mixed shepherd froze outside the doorway and refused to cross the threshold. An eager volunteer reached for the leash. Grace stopped him. "Give her room. She has to go inside eventually." Eventually isn't the same as now. They walked the dog around the snow-packed yard instead. 15 minutes later, she approached the doorway again, sniffed the sill, and stepped across without being pulled. Owen watched from the main bay. Northlight, he thought, was developing rules Luke had never written. The first woodworking group consisted of 8 adults seated around 2 benches. Halfway through the morning, one participant cut a board nearly half an inch short. Everyone looked at Owen. He knew 3 ways to fix it before the man finished saying, "Well, hell." Owen kept his hands in his jacket pockets. "What options do you see?" Silence. Then one person suggested shortening the matching piece. Another proposed adding trim. Victor offered an unnecessarily complicated third solution just to irritate everyone. Within 5 minutes, the mistake had become a discussion instead of a failure. Owen stepped away. Later, Grace called him into the office. Juniper lay beside her chair wearing the simple cognac collar Owen had bought but refused to put on her until the paperwork was complete. Grace opened the adoption file. The rescue had checked Owen's fencing, finances, schedule, veterinary plan, and backup caregivers. He had not received special treatment because he found Juniper. Grace would have considered that irresponsible. "One last question," she said. "Why do you want her?" Owen looked at Juniper. Months earlier, he might have said she had saved him. It would have sounded good. It would also have made her responsible for something that belonged to him. "Because I like this dog," he said. "I can give her a stable life. I understand her better than I did in January." Grace waited. Owen added, "And I want her around even on days when I don't need anything from her." Grace signed the final page. "That's the answer." Owen fastened Juniper's collar himself, She immediately scratched at it with one hind foot. Grace laughed. Moving ceremony. That afternoon, Owen kept his appointment with Jonah. Northlight was open. Juniper was officially his. He went to counseling anyway. When Jonah asked what had changed, Owen took time to answer. I used to think responsibility meant making sure nobody else had to carry anything. And now? Owen looked through the office glass at Victor showing someone how to adjust a tool. Now I think it means knowing what part is actually mine. Near sunset, the last workshop participant left. Owen checked the building once, not 3 times. At the key cabinet, his hand paused. For years, the Northlight key had remained on a separate leather ring in his pocket. Now Victor had one. Grace had access to the annex. Board members had theirs. Owen placed his key on its labeled hook among the others. Juniper waited near the entrance. Outside, late sunlight turned the snow pale gold. Behind them, Northlight remained lit. Tomorrow someone would arrive at 8. There would be mistakes, repairs, foster dogs that refused doors, people who needed work, and people Owen would have to trust to do it differently than he would. Luke would not walk through those doors. That truth had not changed. What had changed was Owen's belief that keeping the building untouched could keep his brother closer. He opened the door. Juniper stepped into the cold, then looked back once, not to lead him anywhere, only to see whether he was coming. Owen followed. This time, he already knew the way home. Sometimes healing is not about returning to the life we had before loss. It is learning to live honestly in the life that remains. Owen could not bring Luke back, and Juniper could not erase his grief. What changed was his willingness to stop guarding every door alone. He allowed other people to carry part of the work, and in doing so, discovered that love does not disappear when life changes shape. If you are carrying a loss that still follows you into quiet rooms, you do not have to force yourself to move on. Sometimes peace begins with one smaller step, letting someone in, accepting one hand, or simply allowing tomorrow to be different from yesterday. If this story stayed with you, share what it made you think about in the comments, and subscribe if you would like to hear more stories about courage, loyalty, and finding a way forward. May you find peace without having to forget, and may the doors ahead of you open when you are ready to walk through them.